So this is part 5 of a series of videos I'm doing on the Criterion channel year 1. I'm going through all the films that I watched on the Criterion channel in its first year, plus the charter subscriber period before the official launch of the channel. And the last video in this series will have statistics of the films that I watched, overview of some of the more standout films in case people aren't interested in these a little bit more in-depth videos, as well as I'll be talking about some pros and cons, things that I really like about the channel, and things in areas where I would like to see improvements on. So it's the next day, and I feel like, I'm a little bit out of the groove since I was just recording video after video yesterday. Hopefully this one isn't too, rusty. There's some extra information and disclaimers that I go over in the very first part, in the first video of this series, so please watch that so that you know that information. Continuing, I'm on number 72, which is The Girl on the Train, a French film from 2007, directed by André Téchiné. A young woman starts a relationship with a wrestler who ends up being arrested. Following their breakup, she falsely claims and files a police report of being attacked on a train. I gave this a 1.5 out of 5 stars. I feel like this is one of the lowest ratings I have. This is just a no for me. The first half is just her and the wrestler together, and I don't particularly like either of them. It's not until halfway through the film that she says she was beaten on the train, and the boyfriend is now the ex-boyfriend, and he's no longer in the film. And I didn't even know that would be part of the film. The synopsis on the channel, I'm pretty sure, more so focuses on her falsely claiming that she was attacked on the train, that she was beaten because people misidentified her as being Jewish, and earlier in the film she saw news reports of Jewish people being beaten, so she obviously took inspiration from that, and that's where her false claim came from, even though she's not Jewish. Anyway, I wasn't gonna go into that. It was probably a good 40 minutes at least of her being with this guy, and I didn't have any idea that that was gonna be a part of the film. It just switches really oddly. It feels like 2 different films in one, and personally, other than maybe what happens with her boyfriend, other than that being the sort of breaking point of her making this false claim or acting out, I don't really see that much of a connection between these 2 halves of the film. There were some weird moments between her and this maybe middle school, early high school aged boy, and the main character, she's probably in her mid to late 20s. At least that's what I'm assuming. That's what she looks like. I don't really know, but she's significantly older than this boy, and there were just weird moments between them, and honestly I thought it was about to go somewhere. Maybe that was just the way I interpreted it. It didn't go there, but I was like, is it gonna go there? Please don't. It didn't. Catherine Deneuve, one of my favorite actresses, plays the mother in this, and she's just she's genuinely concerned and trying to help her daughter. But the girl, this main character, she could not be any more closed off. It makes it really hard not only to like her, but to understand her motives. And she's also a terrible liar. Even the mom knows that she's made this up and made a false claim and police report. Catherine Deneuve as the mom was probably one of the best parts, including another supporting role, this lawyer guy who's related to the boy. They're part of this family that also kind of gets involved with the narrative, but really you have a little bit of backstory for them, and I feel like it's not even that significant. There are scenes that I'm why was that there? I mean, yeah, maybe I know the family a little bit more, but I didn't need to know that for what happens. But ultimately, I just think this needed to be edited down or narrowed down. Honestly, maybe there's just not enough of a story to make it that compelling for a feature film. If you've seen this, I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts. If you haven't seen it, even though clearly I'm not saying very positive things about it, but you can see for yourself because it is available on the channel currently. But we're going to move on to the next film. Number 73 is Look at Me, a French film from 2004, directed by Agnès Jaoui. A young woman training to be a singer looks up to her vocal coach, who she becomes close to. The young woman's father is a successful and famous author with a young second wife and child. He helps establish the vocal coach's husband, also an author, in his literary world. That's as much of a concise synopsis as I could come up with. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars and clicked the heart. This one and the next film are definitely a couple of the standout films for me. I want to rewatch them, so I'd like them to be available from Criterion again in some way, whether they came back to the Criterion channel or are released onto the collection. Right now they're no longer on the channel, which is, I feel like I implied that, but I'm just clarifying there that they're not available right now for me to rewatch. I'd love to take another look at the characters more. This one I feel like I didn't enjoy as much as the next one, but they're still both really like compelling and interesting. And what I find particularly interesting about this one is that every character wants attention from another character, and the way that they interact and intertwine, that's something that I really like about stories, when there are a lot of characters that you get to know and they're connected in different ways. And I liked watching this unfold and analyzing the characters, but I still want to dive deeper. I think I mentioned this briefly in a previous video, but I don't remember what video that was. And I've been meaning to do a video talking about this film and the next one a little bit more thoroughly, but I'm not sure how well I could do that now because it's been a while since I've seen them and I don't know where they are available to watch right now. But anyway, the next film is by the same director. So this one, number 74, is called The Taste of Others. It's from the year 2000, and it's about a businessman who falls in love with a stage actress who also ends up being his English teacher. His wife is preoccupied redoing her sister-in-law's apartment, and the actress/English teacher goes to various art events her friends are involved in, where the businessman sometimes tags along and ends up being a part of this group. The businessman also has 2 bodyguards/drivers, and you get a glimpse into their love lives. So again, a big cast of characters, all connected in different ways, and for each of these synopses, I'm leaving out other characters. That's an overview of the plot. I also gave this a 4 out of 5 stars and clicked the heart. As I just mentioned, this is another film where all the characters are intertwined, and just as the title of the previous one is Look at Me, while the characters all want a particular someone to essentially look at them, this title is The Taste of Others, and the characters' personal taste in things, mostly taste in art, is a major part of the film. As much as I liked each of these films, I found this one to be a little bit more charming and therefore more enjoyable to watch. Number 75 is Desperately Seeking Susan, which is an American film from 1985. This is directed by Susan Seidelman. Seidelman? I'm not sure the pronunciation. I tried to look it up, but the page wouldn't load. Susan Seidelman. Neither of them are leaping out at me as sounding more correct. A woman is obsessed with the relationship between a woman named Susan and a man whom she reads about in the personals of the newspaper. She kind of starts to stalk Susan, and then when she's hurt and gets amnesia, she thinks she is Susan. Meanwhile, there is a thief after Susan, well, more like a bag that Susan is carrying, and therefore after Susan. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I don't have much to say on this one. It's actually a title I've heard of for a really long time, and I'm just kind of glad that I know what it is now. I don't know why the title of this has stuck out to me so much over the years, because I don't think of it in terms of being in the same tier as so many other great films. I don't know, maybe it had like a pretty big following when it came out. I'm not exactly sure. But now I've seen the film and I'm good with that one time. I also wanted a bit more Madonna. I'm glad she was a character and not just like Madonna as Madonna, the way some names can be if they're working in an area they're not specifically known for, if you get what I'm saying. I could have done with more Susan, which is the character that Madonna plays. Although Rosanna Arquette was super cute, I just wanted more Madonna. I found Susan more interesting, but we followed Rosanna Arquette's character as she was dealing with this amnesia. And this one is no longer available on the channel. Okay, now we're on to the films that I watched that are part of the Directed by Jane Campion collection. Although not all of these films are available anymore in that collection. I don't know why that is. It seems odd to me that if they, I don't know, this is just kind of more about the channel in general. It seems odd to me that they would have like a collection, or yeah, collection is just the term I'm going to use for lack of a better one right now, but it seems odd to me that they would have a collection of films all directed by the same director, but then have some of them go off the channel. So the first one here, number 76, is An Exercise in Discipline, Peel, which is an Australian film from 1982, directed by Jane Campion. This is about a boy who is kicked out of the car and has to pick up the pieces of an orange peel he threw out of the window while they were driving down the road. And I didn't give it a rating. It's like a 9-minute short that I honestly have no thoughts on. So we're just gonna move on to number 77, A Girl's Own Story, an Australian film from 1983, directed by Jane Campion. This is a 25-minute short about the lives of 3 teenage girls in the 1960s. I don't want to make it sound too simple, but that's the synopsis. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And so there's one girl in this who ends up getting pregnant, and the scene when she's with her boyfriend, I for some reason interpreted it as her being at home with her brother. And I was like, that's weird. But then I was reading the synopsis on Letterboxd, and the Letterboxd synopsis says it's her boyfriend. So I'm really glad that I have that clarification now and know that it was not her brother who got her pregnant, because that would have been weird. I don't really know what made me think that, and I don't remember if there was anything that indicates their exact relationship. But besides that, I thought the short had a similar feeling to The Virgin Suicides and Picnic at Hanging Rock, just in the way that we're looking at the lives of teenage girls. I really liked the ending scene as well. It kind of took this sort of, I guess, surrealist kind of turn. I don't know, the ending scene, it was like it didn't really have to do with the film. Suddenly the girls were like singing, and it was sort of like a music video in a way, and then it just ended, and I found that to be a really interesting way to end the film. Number 78 is Passionless Moments, an Australian film from 1983. This is another short film, this time directed by Jane Campion and Gerald Lee. This is a series of the awkward trials of everyday living, which is the synopsis from Letterboxd. It's so short that I just went with that one. I gave this a 2.5 out of 5 stars. This was a bit too boring for me, and there were quite a number of scenes, as in a series of awkward trials. Like, there were so many that were a part of this series, especially for being such a short film. I actually think that this holds a lot of potential, though. I feel like it could be worked on and become fuller with developed characters and the scenes connected in ways, even if they're just connected in the sense of one person being in a scene and then going home and saying hi to their parents, and then now the scene is about their parents. Number 79 is Two Friends, an Australian film from 1986, directed by Jane Campion, and I'm pretty sure this is her first feature-length film credit, although it's not a feature film per se, it was a television film. It's the story of a friendship between 2 teenage girls falling apart told in backwards chronological order. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I'm not sure what the effect was supposed to be, having it told backwards. And I almost feel like there's a disconnect somewhere, like not in terms of me in the story, but the chunks of time themselves. I couldn't quite see like how the two girls were no longer friends in the beginning. In the beginning of the film, which is the end of their relationship, one girl had run away and is like surviving on her own with a guy, I think. But I don't understand how it got to that. And I surely saw differences between the two girls and their priorities and their outlook on life and how they handle things that happened. And they have different home lives. But I just couldn't see how their friendship ended up falling apart and how where they were in the end of their relationship, how it got to be so drastic. It just didn't connect fully for me. Number 80 is Sweeney, an Australian film from 1989, directed by Jane Campion, and I feel like this is her first film. Obviously, that's more well known because the other one was a TV movie. Sweetie comes to visit, or more like live with, her sister Kay and Kay's boyfriend. They don't get along, and Kay treats Sweetie differently than their parents do. Their parents don't see Sweetie's mental illness and indulge in her behavior with no consequences. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars and clicked the heart. I really like this film. I think there are different ways of looking at it and the relationships the characters have, and not just the two sisters, but each sister with their parents and Kay with her boyfriend. There are more so hints at certain things that I feel like aren't fully confirmed. Like, I don't know how else to say that while still being vague. I feel like only if you've seen the film you understand what I'm getting at. There's a way that a certain relationship and characters can be interpreted here that aren't confirmed. It's sort of just like hinted at and insinuated, but you don't know for sure. And I don't think Kay knows for sure either. She kind of sees something. I can't go into details though, and I don't want to. This is a situation where I don't want to give these details. There are some movies that I've been talking about that I'm giving a little bit more detail to, but I feel like this is something that you should just watch for yourself to see what I mean. Or unless you've already seen the film, then you hopefully know what I'm talking about and I'm not being really confusing. I also have to say that I'm not sure what illness Sweetie has. I tried looking it up and I read part of an article where Jane Campion says she had no intention of dramatizing a case history of a specific mental illness. So I'll link the article in the description if you want to read that for yourself. I didn't read the whole thing, but I was just trying to look up what Sweetie was dealing with, and there isn't supposed to be one, I guess, according to Jane Campion. It's just supposed to be she has a mental illness, but nothing specific. I think it's supposed to be less about the mental illness itself and more so the family dealing with it and just all the characters. Hopefully I worded all of that all right. Okay, and then number 81, An Angel at My Table, a New Zealand film, and this is from 1990. This is a biopic of Janet Frame, who was a New Zealand author. It's based on her own autobiographical work, and it starts when she's in elementary school and goes into her adulthood. She comes from a poor family with a handful of children, and it shows her aspirations for wanting to be a writer, but it also portrays some time she spent in hospitals and in asylums. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars and clicked the heart. This broke me. The escalation of this film from like a psychological perspective, how it ended up going the route it did, it's frustrating, it's baffling, it's terrible. I was crying to the point that I couldn't breathe. I still have yet to really look into Janet Frame's life more and also look into how the medical field in New Zealand was treating such illnesses at the time. I think a lot of what I know about like the treatment of mental illnesses is very American and European centric. And that's what I'm assuming, at least, because most of the major figures that I know about are American or European. Granted, maybe that's just where the bulk of the field of psychology has been developed. In terms of the film, though, I should clarify that this is what happens in the movie. Again, I haven't really looked into Janet Frame's life as much as I would like to as of yet. So what I know is solely based on the film. And it goes from her mentioning something about taking Aspros, which I had to look up, and I think it has to do with aspirin. I still don't 100% understand what Aspros is. It goes from her mentioning something about taking Aspros to one of her professors, and then him and a few other members of the school staff come to where she's staying and ask her if she needs a rest. That's how they phrased it, was needs a rest. And she says no, she's fine. And then they pretty much insist, and the next thing you know, she's at a hospital taking the rest. But then she ends up staying in the psych ward, and then she gets transferred to a notorious asylum, and along the way at some point she was misdiagnosed with schizophrenia. And then she was hours, maybe minutes, away from getting a lobotomy. And what stopped it is that I guess one of the doctors heard word of a published work of hers receiving a literary award. She did have a history of mental illness in her family, and she did have depression, and there are details that I'm forgetting or just bypassing right now because of time. But how did this happen? Why did this happen? How did it get to that point? I understand that there's a big disconnect here because of the time the film takes place in and me in current time. It's still so frustrating and baffling, and it's terrible. I hate it, and it broke me. There's a line where she says that she endured 200 times of electroshock therapy treatment. What? They fried her brain 200 times? And she's just fine after. I can't. Oh my god. It was heartbreaking at times, but it's a great film. And the subject, Janet Frame, who I hadn't heard of before, I would like to learn more about, obviously. I think I made that clear. But yeah, also I want to look more into mental illness, specifically in New Zealand and for the specific context of her life. Everything that I've mentioned so far, An Angel at My Table, Sweeney, Two Friends, Passionless Moments, A Girl's Own Story, and An Exercise in Discipline, Peel, those are all still available on the channel. However, the next 3 are no longer available on the channel, but also obviously they're not under the Directed by Jane Campion collection. So, we have number 82, DooPiano, which I'm kind of unsure what the country of this film is. It's probably either New Zealand or Australia, and it's from 1993, directed by Jane Campion. In the mid-1800s, a woman and her young daughter travel to New Zealand, where the woman's new husband waits. She is a pianist and is mute. A relationship starts up between her and another man. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I think it's a well done film. The cast is really good, and I really like the costumes as well. I just didn't like the main relationship or the husband. I didn't like either of the two men. Maybe it has to do with the time. I know it has to do with the time period to some extent, but I didn't like them as people either. Even if I were to strip away as much as possible that is being influenced by the way things were at the time and such, I don't think I would like them still. And I don't know if it's just because she couldn't speak, but I didn't see a connection between her and the guy she was having an affair with. No spark the entire film. I didn't see it. I think it's a very well-made film, just not really to my liking, though, in terms of what actually happens. The cast was great, though. The costumes were great. The plot wasn't for me. The characters. What am I even saying? It's the characters that weren't there for me. And then number 83 is Holy Smoke, an Australian film from 1999, directed by Jane Campion. A young woman becomes part of a religious cult in India, and her family tricks her into coming back home. They hire a cult deprogrammer to help her, but she's very resistant and defiant. I also gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I might rate this down It would only be like half a star, but I don't know. I go back and forth between keeping ratings for what I rated them when I logged it or first watched it, or if I should edit ratings after the fact. This is another one that I didn't really like the characters, and there were moments I couldn't tell how serious it was being or if some parts were supposed to be funny. I also couldn't tell if Kate Winslet's character was like playing the deprogrammer guy the whole time or if she was actually being herself. But I didn't like her nonetheless. And then number 84 is In the Cut, an American film from 2003, directed by Jane Campion. I don't know if it's actually her first American film, but this is the first American film of hers that I'm mentioning that was available on the channel. A young woman is murdered, and an English teacher / aspiring writer becomes involved in the case. She's interviewed by one of the detectives on the case, who she starts a relationship with. It's about this woman, her relationship, and the hunt for the killer. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars and clicked the heart. Personally, Sweeney and In the Cut were my favorites from this directed by Jane Campion collection. I kind of felt like I had seen this before, or like parts of it. It could be something that I caught on TV one time, but it was too long ago to remember, or I wasn't paying enough attention. I wouldn't call it a detective movie, just to clarify. It has like thriller and detective moments, of course, but there's also drama with the woman and her teaching, and she has a sister and thoughts of her own she's dealing with on top of the relationship she starts up. In my synopsis, I say it's also about the hunt for the killer, which is true, but it's not like, this isn't Zodiac, okay? You can't compare anything to Zodiac though. I shouldn't have said Zodiac because Zodiac is like a near perfect film. Oh, speaking of Zodiac, how weird. Because Mark Ruffalo is in this, and he plays a detective that the main character starts seeing, and this is such a different character for him. He's not like the typical like nice, humble, subtle but strong Mark Ruffalo character. He has like some sexual lines, and there's quite a lot of sexual scenes, and he's intriguing, but I also find him I find there to be a sleaziness to him, like a thin layer of oil on the surface. That's Mark Ruffalo's character in this. But it also may just have to do with the film being kind of gritty and like taking place during the summer, so everyone is sweaty. And he has this gross mustache. Maybe I just find mustaches really gross. And that is the last Jane Campion film. So DooPiano, Holy Smoke, and In the Cut are no longer available on the channel. These are the 3 that were part of the directed by Jane Campion collection that went off the channel. That's where I'm gonna stop this one because it's a nice place to stop. I'd love to know if you have seen any of these films and what you think of them, or if you're interested in watching them. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for the next video in the series.